Three more doctors join us, include Texas. Congressman Ron Paul, Republican of Texas, medical doctor. By the way, he was a flight surgeon in the U.S. Air Force and an OBGYN in private practice. Here in L.A., Dr. Paul Song, radiation oncologist. He supports the president's health care initiative, believes there must be a public option. And in Atlanta, our own Dr. Sanjay Gupta, CNN chief medical correspondent and a practicing neurosurgeon. How will this debate about public access and the like affect you? Will public option affect you, Sanjay?
Well, probably not. In fact, the president has come out and said that people who have private insurance right now, who have access to private insurance, and whose premiums are not above a certain percentage overall of their income, aren't going to be eligible for the public option. So there's a lot of people who it won't affect, and I think that's really important, Larry, because there was all this sort of talk about people sort of flooding the public option. Not everyone's going to qualify, myself included. You as well, Larry.
Yeah. Dr. Song, you favor it, do you not?
Yes, and I think the big reason is that Milton Friedman, who's an economist that a lot of the conservatives like to quote, in 2001 had an essay that basically said that the third payer system that we have right now was the most cost ineffective system that was available. But since that time, the insurance companies continue to grow. Their overall profits have increased by over 400%, and the premiums have raised by greater than 87% during that time. And I think the big concern is that if we don't have a public option, all you're doing is putting more money into the system that will basically go to the insurance companies without any regulation for patients.
Congressman Paul, if you agree something's wrong and you don't like public option, what do you like?
Well, I'd like to see a little bit more freedom. Most of the time, people do say there's problems. Nobody's denying that. But you know, the problem is that we've had managed care. We've had government manipulation of medical care for 40 years now. So we can hardly say it's the private sector that has caused the trouble. So I would like to see renewal of a spirit of freedom in this country where we can trust the market but not trust the government, because the government doesn't deliver. They've had Medicare. It's broke. They have Veterans Care. It's a lousy system. Nobody likes that. People aren't taken care of. But what do? We have rejected the notion of, say, the church hospital. We wiped them out of business. We have Shriner hospitals, 22 of them, that gives free care to all children. And they are having a trouble because of the inflation, because of the cost. So I think our biggest failure in this debate is we have not analyzed where the problems came from, rather than just saying, let's go on with more government.
Before I get back to Dr. Gupta, you want to respond?
Yes, I have a lot of respect for Dr. Paul, but one of the things that I think he's saying is incorrect. The idea that the VA system and also Medicare being failures or not being popular are absolutely false. The RAND Corporation, which is actually a conservative think tank, recently published a study that showed excellent satisfaction with the VA system. And the Kaiser Family Foundation actually showed that Medicare is actually run more efficiently with much more dollars going for actual patient care than the private sector. So, and the other thing I want to touch on is this idea of freedom. We have less freedom when you are told by an insurance company where to go, where to get your treatment, what hospital you need to get seen at. Some patients need to drive extra distances because their insurance companies won't let them go to the hospital that's in their own neighborhood. If you had some type of single-payer system, patients would be free to go wherever they wanted. And I would also add, if you're really concerned about freedom, then if you're an employee who's stuck in a job that you don't like, but you're there strictly because of the health benefits, if you had some sort of universal system, you could go to take a job anywhere you wanted.
Dr. Paul, before we get to Sanjay, what do you think of the co-op idea?
Well, if it's private, it's okay, but a government-mandated co-op won't work. But the doctor misinterpreted what I said, because he didn't accept the fact that we've had managed government care. So if he says it's not doing well, then you have to blame managed care, the tax code, tort law, how well people can sell insurance across the borders, in the inflationary problem. And I did not say that Medicare didn't work. I said it was broke. And you got to admit that. And here we're putting another program on the government system. The government's broke. We have $2 trillion worth of debt this year. And you think we're going to add this new program, and the country's bankrupt. We're not being practical at all by talking about this.
Sanjay, where are you in this?
Well, you know, no one's good at controlling costs here. I mean, that's one thing that's an irrefutable fact. Whether it's a private sector or the public sector, you can't hold up any of these sectors and say, look, this is a good example of how to do this right. And by the way, it's not just the United States. It's around the world where healthcare costs have outpaced inflation in just about every country in the world. So this is something that we're dealing with as a global society, Larry. Whether it's people are using technology more, using more prescription drugs, whether it's chronic disease. You know, we spent over almost $150 billion on obesity-related diseases in this country alone. So, you know, the healthcare is expensive, and I think that's really at the heart of a lot of this. How exactly you pay for it, who's going to pay for it exactly. I think that's where this debate's really centered.
Let me get a break. Still ahead, by the way, later on. Sanjay, can you briefly explain the co-op idea?
A co-op is not government-run, although it may have some government seed money. It is a non-profit organization that you know, typically is made up of people who are often members insured, meaning that people they want to get health care insurance from a co-op, but they're also members of the board of the co-op, so they can help determine premiums. They can help determine what sort of services are covered. The way that a co-op is successful typically is that it's based on scale. If you have hundreds of thousands of people involved in a co-op actually buying into it, you can negotiate prices well and be competitive with the private insurance industry. So, you know, for example, a house mom in Tennessee watching right now, if she's uninsured, she's trying to get herself and her kids insured, she might join a co-op, and it could be cheaper than private insurance if they have lots of people involved. But if they don't, it's very hard to compete.
Dr. Song, does that appeal to you?
I think the problem with that in my study of this is that unless you have at least 500,000 people that will form a network, that it's going to be hard to do, particularly in rural areas. And what you're seeing more and more in the past 7 years is monopolies that have been formed by insurance companies that make it real hard for any type of negotiating power, and premiums have gone up. So if you can't get 500,000 people together to really put together a good economy of scale, I'm not sure how this is going to work in large parts of our society.
Congressman Paul, you're there in the House. Where do you think it's going? What are we going to get?
Oh, a little incrementalism. I don't think Obama's going to get what he wants, but we'll have more government, and the cost will continue to go up, and the quality of medical care will go down. They put $50 billion in the bill just for surveillance of every single medical transaction, and they have the legislation to control that in Washington. So there will be no medical transaction that isn't controlled electronically and known by the government for so-called monitoring. So it's going to cost $50 billion to try to find out where the waste and the fraud is, but the system is wasteful and fraudulent.
Sanjay, you look puzzled.
Yeah, I'm not. I guess I was a little confused as to what specifically Congressman Paul was talking about there. I'm not sure if he's talking about the health IT or what, or if he's saying that's a bad idea. My understanding was that was to try and streamline a lot of the unbelievable paperwork. You know, you have primary care doctors who are seeing over 5,000 patients in their clinic. Each one of those patients comes with insurance forms and all sorts of other forms. To try and streamline that in some way has been one sort of tactic to try and increase the number of primary care doctors. So I was just a little confused by what you were talking about.
Okay, let me tell you, the stimulus package gave the authority to the executive branch to set up the computer system to record every medical transaction in the country. Now they put $50 billion of seed money in there for somebody to monitor everything a hospital does, everything a lab does, everything a doctor does, everything a pharmacy does. Now, that is not going to be efficient. That's going to cost a lot of money, very confusing, and it's going to distort the whole concept. But when the government's in charge, and they want this one-payer system, this is socialized medicine. It doesn't work. It fails all the time. Some people may get care for a while, but eventually everybody's going to get equal care. But equality is going to go down. That's what it's all about.
But we don't have the best care now, do we, Dr. Song?
No, I would argue that no one agrees. I mean, we can all agree that the current system is absolutely broken. And as far as a track record of how government programs work, I think Medicare has been in business for 45 years. My own father, who was diagnosed with cancer, is able to get access to care in a much more timely fashion than my own patients who are coming to me who have private insurance.
All right, tell you what, guys, we're going to have you all back maybe tomorrow, because this needs a lot more attention than it's getting, and it's getting a lot. By the way, if you don't have insurance and need medical attention, a man helping to provide that care, and we'll keep the panel for a little while, too, will join us next.